Ever feel like you're not being prioritized or respected the way you should be? In today's video, I'm sharing 10 simple Stoic rules that can help you change that. These tips are super easy to apply and can make a huge difference in how people see and treat you. Let's get started. Number 1. Speak less, listen more. Speak less, listen more is one of those principles that sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It's not just about keeping your mouth shut for the sake of it. It's about creating space. Space for others to feel heard, valued, and respected. When you're talking all the time, you're not just filling the air with words, you're missing out on the chance to actually connect with people. Here's the thing, everyone loves to feel like what they're saying matters, but not everyone gets that kind of attention. When you speak less, people notice. It's almost like there's a mystery about you. They want to hear from you, but they have to wait for it, and that builds a sense of intrigue. You're not giving away everything at once. The person who holds back a little has control over the conversation without dominating it. You're creating a dynamic where when you finally do say something, people are more likely to lean in and really listen. They know your words carry weight, and that makes them respect what you have to say. But let's talk about the other half of this, listening. True listening is an underrated superpower. And I mean really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk. You know the difference, right? There's a kind of listening where you're nodding along, but in your head, you're already crafting your response. Then there's the kind of listening where you're so dialed in, you're actually processing and absorbing what the other person is saying. That's the kind that leaves an impression. When you listen deeply, people feel understood. They feel like their words matter to you. That simple act of listening changes the entire vibe of the interaction. It's a mutual exchange of respect. When someone feels heard, they naturally respect you more because you've shown them something valuable, you've given them your attention, which, let's be honest, is something we don't always get enough of these days. Listening also gives you an edge. People reveal so much in what they say, and in what they don't say. You pick up on cues, subtext, emotions that others miss. The person who speaks less and listens more tends to be more aware of the room, the mood, and the people in it. You gain insight not just into what's being discussed, but how it's being discussed. This heightened awareness allows you to respond thoughtfully when you do speak, further elevating the respect others have for you. It also helps you avoid saying something you might regret. How many times have we blurted out something in the heat of the moment only to wish we had taken a beat? By staying quiet and listening first, you give yourself the time to consider your words carefully. It's a way of showing self-control and maturity, two qualities that others naturally respect. So yeah, speaking less and listening more isn't just about keeping quiet for the sake of it. It's about being intentional with your words and giving others the space to feel heard. It's a subtle shift in how you engage with people, but the respect and attention you gain from it, that can be a game changer. Number 2, keep your word. Keeping your word, such a simple concept, but it's a game changer when it comes to how people see you. It's more than just doing what you say you'll do. It's about showing others that you are dependable, that your promises aren't empty words just floating around. Think of it as a quiet superpower. People often overpromise and underdeliver, and that's where you can stand out by doing the opposite. The more you follow through, the more others take you seriously. It's like building a reputation brick by brick. When you keep your word, you're saying to people, hey, I respect your time and your trust. And in return, they start valuing your time too. It's like a silent agreement, you treat people right, and they'll do the same for you. There's something magnetic about a person who doesn't flake or back out. They become the type of person others naturally want to prioritize. Why? Because reliability is rare. And when something is rare, people gravitate toward it. But here's the kicker, it's not always easy to stick to what you say. Life happens. Things get in the way. Maybe you've overbooked yourself, or you just don't feel like following through on that commitment you made a week ago. We've all been there. However, this is exactly where Stoic wisdom comes into play. You've got to train your mind to treat your word as gold, no matter what. The Stoics teach us that our character is built on what we consistently do, not what we occasionally say. You might think, it's just one little thing, no one will care. But the truth is, people do notice. Even if it's subconscious, they'll clock whether you followed through or not. It's the small actions that add up over time. If you're someone who constantly shows up when you say you will, people will remember. They'll respect you for it. And guess what? When people respect you, they naturally prioritize you in their own lives. Now, keeping your word doesn't mean overloading yourself. If you've committed to too much, it's better to renegotiate or be honest up front rather than let someone down later. The key is transparency. There's no harm in saying, I thought I could, but I need to adjust. People appreciate honesty far more than broken promises. It's when you say nothing and then fail to deliver that the respect begins to crumble. Here's another layer to this: when you keep your word to others, you're also keeping it to yourself. Each time you follow through, you're reinforcing your own self-discipline. It feels good, doesn't it? To know that you can trust yourself. It's like an internal compass pointing you toward a more centered, grounded version of yourself. And others feel that energy too. In the end, keeping your word is more than just checking off a box on your to-do list. It's about building trust, respect, and a solid reputation that makes people see you differently. It's a ripple effect that touches every part of your life, and it all starts with a simple commitment. Say what you mean what you say, and then do it. Number 3. View insults as reflections of the insulter. When someone throws an insult your way, the first instinct might be to feel offended or hurt. That sting you feel? Totally normal. But here's the thing, insults are rarely about you. They're usually a reflection of what's going on with the person throwing them. Think about it. Why would someone feel the need to bring another person down unless they're battling their own insecurities, frustrations, or issues? Stoicism teaches us to view insults in a detached way, to step back and see them for what they are, an expression of the insulter's internal world, not a statement of who we are. When someone insults you, they're showing you more about themselves than they are about you. It's like holding up a mirror to their own mindset, not yours. Let's break it down. When a person lashes out, they might be projecting their own fears, doubts, or feelings of inadequacy. Maybe they're frustrated with something unrelated, but instead of dealing with that directly, they choose to channel that energy towards someone else. You're just in the line of fire. It's like someone dropping a glass and blaming the floor for it breaking. The glass was bound to fall, and the insult was bound to come out, but it doesn't mean the floor, or you, had anything to do with it. Now, think about the power dynamics here. If you get upset or flustered by an insult, you're giving them control over your emotions. You're letting them dictate how you feel. But if you can see their insult as just noise, as a reflection of their own struggles, then you take that power back. Their words lose their sting. They become just words. A breeze passing by. One of the reasons insults can feel so personal is because we're wired to seek approval. We want to be liked, respected, and acknowledged. But when you understand that insults often have nothing to do with you, you can step outside of that need for validation. Someone calling you names doesn't change your worth. It doesn't diminish who you are. If anything, it tells you that the other person is the one struggling with their own self-worth. Of course, this doesn't mean you should dismiss every bit of criticism or feedback that comes your way. There's a difference between constructive criticism and a straight-up insult. Stoicism encourages us to be open to feedback that can help us grow, but we should be discerning. If the intent behind someone's words is just to hurt or bring you down, you don't have to take it on board. You can choose what to accept and what to let go of. And here's the kicker: once you start seeing insults as a reflection of the other person, they stop bothering you. You might even feel a sense of compassion or pity for the insulter. After all, they're clearly dealing with something if they feel the need to strike out at someone else. Instead of letting their words penetrate, you can stay centered, grounded in the knowledge that their insults are just echoes of their own inner turmoil. In the end, insults don't define you. How you respond to them does. And when you respond with calmness, confidence, and the understanding that it's really about them and not you, you'll find that people respect you more. They'll see that you're not easily rattled, that you stand firm in who you are. That kind of quiet strength commands respect without you having to demand it. Number 4, avoid gossip and idle talk. Gossip and idle talk, it's so easy to slip into, right? You're in a conversation, and before you know it, the topic turns to someone else's life, their drama, their mistakes. It can feel harmless, even fun, to speculate or trade stories about what so-and-so is up to. But here's the thing: when you engage in gossip or meaningless chatter, you're wasting more than just time. You're eroding trust, your own credibility, and the respect others have for you. Think about it for a second. When people hear you gossiping, what are they really thinking? Sure, they might join in, laugh along, or even add their own bits to the conversation, but in the back of their mind, there's a voice saying, if they talk about others like this, what do they say about me when I'm not around? It plants a seed of doubt, a feeling that they can't fully trust you. And trust is the foundation of respect. When you stay out of gossip, you send a different kind of message. You show that you value integrity, that you're not interested in tearing others down behind their backs just for the sake of filling a conversation. People will notice that you don't engage in that low-level chatter, and they'll respect you for it, even if they don't say it out loud. It sets you apart, in a quiet but powerful way. Now, let's talk about idle talk, the kind of empty conversation that doesn't really go anywhere. We all know what that feels like. It's those surface-level exchanges about nothing that just pass the time. There's nothing wrong with small talk here and there, but if your conversations are always shallow or aimless, people may start to feel like there's no depth to you. And if there's no depth, there's nothing to respect. By avoiding idle talk, you make room for conversations that actually matter. When you speak, it becomes clear that you're saying something worth hearing. You're not just filling the air with empty words. You're bringing thoughtfulness, focus, and intention to what you say. And that's refreshing, because in a world full of noise, people crave something real, something meaningful. When you're the one who brings that to the table, you stand out. And here's another layer to it: when you rise above gossip and avoid the fluff, you protect your own energy. Gossip, in particular, is a form of negativity that drains both the person talking and the person listening. It shifts the energy of a conversation toward judgment, comparison, and even envy. That's a toxic vibe. But when you stay away from that and focus on things that uplift or at least stay neutral, you're maintaining a sense of calm and control. People feel that from you. It's almost like a quiet strength, and they're drawn to it. Avoiding gossip and idle talk is also a kind of discipline. It takes effort not to get pulled into those easy conversations that go nowhere. But when you practice that discipline, people see you as someone who has their priorities straight, someone who values their time and energy. That's the kind of person others naturally respect. So, next time you feel the pull toward gossip or meaningless chatter, pause. Ask yourself, is this conversation adding value? If it's not, maybe it's time to steer it somewhere else or just stay quiet. Because at the end of the day, the words you choose to speak or not speak say a lot about the kind of person you are. And the person who rises above the noise, that's the one who commands respect. Number 5. Deliberately lower your expectations in relationships. When it comes to relationships, we all tend to carry around a suitcase full of expectations, some spoken, some unspoken. We expect people to show up for us, to treat us a certain way, to understand us without having to say a word. But here's the thing, when those expectations aren't met, we feel disappointed, maybe even hurt. And that's exactly where Stoic thinking can swoop in to save the day. The idea of deliberately lowering your expectations might sound counterintuitive at first. You might be thinking, why should I expect less from people I care about? But let's dig into that. Expectations are tricky because, more often than not, they're based on assumptions. We assume that others will act, speak, or react in ways we believe are right or fair. But everyone has their own way of doing things, their own set of priorities, their own struggles. When we expect too much from people, we set ourselves up for disappointment. By consciously lowering our expectations, we give ourselves the freedom to enjoy relationships as they are, not as we think they should be. Now, don't get it twisted. Lowering your expectations doesn't mean lowering your standards or accepting bad behavior. It's not about becoming a doormat or putting up with disrespect. It's more about managing your emotional investment in other people's actions. You stop tying your happiness or satisfaction to what others do or don't do. In doing so, you take back control over your emotional state. You're no longer thrown off when someone doesn't act the way you hoped or expected. It's like a cushion for your mind, a buffer against unnecessary frustration. Think of it like this: if you expect someone to always text back immediately and they don't, you might feel slighted or anxious. But if you approach the relationship with fewer demands, the delayed response won't sting as much. You'll feel more at peace because you've detached your happiness from their behavior. That's where real freedom comes in. The Stoics would call it amor fati, loving what happens, accepting things as they are, not how you wish them to be. Lowering your expectations also opens the door to more appreciation. When you don't expect much, the things people do for you feel more like gifts than obligations. It's a shift in perspective. Suddenly, the little gestures become more meaningful. You start noticing the good things rather than fixating on what's lacking. The pressure dissolves. Relationships become lighter, less burdensome, and, surprisingly, more fulfilling. And here's a little secret: when you lower your expectations, others start respecting you more. Why? Because they feel less judged, less scrutinized. They're free to be themselves around you. And that's magnetic. People like being around those who don't constantly need them to fit into a mold. In return, they're more likely to prioritize and respect you, not because you expect them to, but because they want to. So, by deliberately lowering your expectations, you're not giving up on people, you're giving them the space to be human. And in that space, respect has the room to grow naturally, without the weight of demands or disappointment. It's a subtle shift, but one that can bring you more peace and better connections. Number 6. Practice being anonymous to reduce ego. In a world where everyone's trying to stand out, grab attention, and make their mark, practicing anonymity sounds a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? But that's exactly what makes it so powerful. The idea of intentionally stepping back, blending into the background, and letting go of the need to be recognized can feel weird at first, but it's a game changer when it comes to reducing ego. Here's why: when you're constantly seeking the spotlight, your ego gets bigger and bigger. You start to crave recognition and validation from others. It becomes less about what you're actually doing and more about how people perceive you. You want the applause, the likes, the comments, the pats on the back. And while that attention might feel good in the moment, it's a bit of a trap. Because once you get used to it, you start needing it. Your sense of self-worth becomes tied to how much people notice and praise you. The problem? That kind of validation is fleeting and totally out of your control. But when you practice being anonymous, it's like taking a deep breath and letting all that need for validation go. You start doing things just for the sake of doing them, without caring whether anyone's watching. It's incredibly freeing. You'll find that when you're not trying to impress anyone, you actually enjoy things more. The pressure's off. It's just you and whatever you're working on, without the extra weight of worrying about what other people think. And here's the twist: when you stop needing the spotlight, people often start to notice you even more. There's something about someone who doesn't chase attention that naturally draws people in. It's like they sense that quiet confidence, that ability to just do your thing without seeking approval. Ironically, the less you try to be seen, the more you stand out in a world full of people trying so hard to be noticed. But beyond that, practicing anonymity keeps your ego in check. Ego loves attention, loves being the center of things. When you intentionally remove yourself from that equation, your ego starts to shrink. You start seeing yourself as just one small part of something bigger. You realize that not everything revolves around you, and honestly, that's a relief. The pressure to constantly be on fades, and you can focus on what really matters. Being anonymous is also a great way to learn humility. When you're not the star of the show, you're reminded that the world doesn't owe you recognition. It humbles you in the best possible way. You become more grounded, more in tune with the people around you, because you're not wrapped up in how you're being perceived. You become less reactive, less desperate for approval, and much more content with simply being. And maybe that's the ultimate goal, to find contentment in the act of doing, rather than in the applause that follows. Practicing anonymity allows you to strip away the layers of ego and be okay with being unnoticed. It's a subtle but powerful shift that brings a deeper sense of peace and focus. You're no longer performing for an audience, you're just living. At the end of the day, the more you let go of the need to be seen, the more people will respect you. There's something compelling about someone who can work quietly, without the need for constant recognition. It shows strength, self-assurance, and a deep understanding that your worth isn't determined by how many people are clapping for you. Number 7, maintain your integrity. Maintaining your integrity sounds like one of those things we all think we do, but when life gets messy or the pressure's on, it can be surprisingly easy to slip. Integrity isn't just about being honest or doing the right thing when it's convenient. It's about sticking to your values, even when no one's watching, even when doing so might make things a little more difficult for you in the short term. It's like an internal compass that always points you in the right direction, if you choose to follow it. People notice when you hold yourself to a higher standard. They might not always say it, but they feel it. It's the way you handle tricky situations, how you treat people, especially those who can't do anything for you. When you maintain your integrity, it's not just about big, dramatic moments where you're tested. It's about those quiet, everyday choices. Do you take the easy route and cut corners, or do you stick to your principles, even if it's a bit more work? That's the real test. What's interesting is that when you live with integrity, you send out a subtle signal that people pick up on, almost instinctively. They begin to see you as someone reliable, someone who can be trusted, because you're consistent. And that kind of consistency is rare. It's easy to say you're going to do the right thing, but actually doing it, especially when it's hard or unpopular, that's a different story. And that's why people respect those who stay true to themselves. Integrity isn't about being perfect, though. It's not some lofty ideal where you never make a mistake. We're all human, and we all mess up from time to time. The difference is how you handle it when things go sideways. Do you own up to your mistakes, take responsibility, and learn from them? Or do you try to cover them up, shift the blame, or pretend like nothing happened? The way you respond when things don't go according to plan says a lot about your character, and people are always paying attention to that. The funny thing about integrity is that, in the long run, it makes life simpler. You don't have to worry about keeping up with lies, or getting caught in a web of half-truths, because you've stayed true to who you are. When you're consistent in your actions and decisions, people know what to expect from you, and that creates a sense of stability. They trust you, not just because of what you say, but because of what you do, repeatedly, over time. And when people trust you, they naturally respect you. They prioritize your opinions, your time, and your presence, because they know you're someone who stands by their word. It's that consistency, that unwavering sense of who you are, that sets you apart. When you maintain your integrity, you don't have to demand respect, it just follows. At the end of the day, maintaining your integrity isn't always the easiest path, but it's the one that leads to long-lasting respect. It's about showing up as your true self, every time, no matter the situation. And that kind of authenticity? It's magnetic. People can't help but notice. And they'll value you all the more for it. Number 8, control your emotions. Emotions, those wild, unpredictable waves that can knock us off balance if we're not careful. One minute you're calm, the next you're fired up over something someone said or didn't say. It's human, right? But here's the thing, letting your emotions control you is like handing over the keys to your life. And if we're talking about earning respect and getting people to prioritize you, learning to control those emotions is a total game changer. Now, don't get me wrong. Controlling your emotions doesn't mean shutting them down or pretending they don't exist. You're not a robot, and no one's expecting you to be. But if you let every feeling, every irritation, every anger spike dictate your actions, people will start to see you as unstable, even unpredictable. It's hard to respect someone who's always in reactive mode. They'll step around you carefully, not because they respect you, but because they're afraid of setting you off. That's not the kind of energy you want to put out into the world. You want people to feel safe around you, knowing that you won't lose your cool at the slightest inconvenience. So, how do you do it? How do you stop letting your emotions run the show? The Stoics had a great approach to this. It all starts in the mind. Before the emotions take hold, there's a thought. Something happens, someone cuts you off in a conversation, for example, and you get that flash of irritation. It's that split second between stimulus and response where the magic happens. In that moment, you get to decide, do I let this consume me, or do I take a step back and breathe? That's where the power lies. It's not easy, though. In fact, it's a lifelong practice. But here's the cool part, the more you practice, the better you get at catching yourself before your emotions take over. You start becoming the master of your own reactions. And when you're in control of your emotions, you come across as composed, grounded, steady. That's the kind of energy people respect. They see you as someone who doesn't get rattled easily, someone who can handle tough situations without falling apart. They'll start looking up to you, maybe even leaning on you when they need some calm in their own chaos. Another benefit? When you control your emotions, you're no longer at the mercy of other people's actions. You stop giving away your power to things you can't control. You become unshakable, and others notice that. They notice that they can't push your buttons so easily, and that makes them respect you more. You're not over here reacting to everything thrown your way. Instead, you're choosing your battles, staying cool under pressure, and making decisions from a place of clarity, not chaos. That kind of emotional control makes people prioritize you because they know they can rely on you to keep your head when things get intense. It's the kind of calm that draws people in, the type of energy that commands respect. So, the next time you feel your emotions starting to bubble up, take that pause. That one breath might just be the difference between letting your emotions control you and you controlling them. And when you do, you'll find that others naturally begin to see you in a whole new light, steady, respected, and worth prioritizing. Number 9, accept discomfort as growth. Discomfort. It's one of those things we all try to dodge, right? No one wakes up thinking, I'd love to feel uneasy or struggle today. But here's the thing, discomfort is where growth happens. And if you want people to prioritize and respect you, you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Sounds strange, but stick with me. When we face discomfort, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, it's a signal that something is shifting. Something's changing. Growth doesn't come from hanging out in your comfort zone, doing the same old routine day in and day out. That's just maintaining. Real growth comes from those moments when you're stretched, when things feel uncertain, and when you're pushed beyond your usual limits. It's like your mind and body saying, "Hey, we're leveling up here." Let's be honest, though, discomfort sucks. It's messy. It makes you question yourself, your choices, and sometimes even the point of it all. But if you can learn to sit with that discomfort, to embrace it as part of the process, you'll come out stronger on the other side. And the more you embrace discomfort, the less it actually phases you over time. It's like a muscle you're training. At first, it hurts, but after a while, you get stronger. What used to feel impossible becomes manageable. What once scared you now just feels like another challenge. This mindset shift is key when it comes to earning respect from others. People notice when you can handle pressure, when you don't crumble at the first sign of difficulty. They respect someone who can stand firm, even when things aren't going their way. It shows resilience, which is a trait that commands admiration without you having to demand it. Discomfort also brings clarity. When you're uncomfortable, you're forced to pay attention. You can't coast. You've got to assess, adapt, and figure out a way forward. In those moments, you learn more about yourself than you ever would when everything's going smoothly. You discover your limits, your strengths, and how much you're really capable of handling. Spoiler, it's usually way more than you think. Now, here's where Stoicism really comes into play. A lot of discomfort comes from resisting what's happening. We get stressed or anxious because we're fighting against reality. Stoicism teaches us to accept things as they are. If you stop resisting discomfort and instead lean into it, it loses its grip on you. You realize that discomfort isn't this big, bad thing to be avoided at all costs. It's just part of life, part of the human experience. And when you stop viewing it as a threat, it becomes less daunting. You'll also notice something interesting. The more you accept discomfort, the more grounded you feel. You're no longer thrown off by every challenge or setback. People pick up on that. They see someone who can weather the storm, who doesn't shy away from tough situations. That kind of calm in the face of adversity? That's powerful. And people respect it deeply. So, next time you feel that discomfort creeping in, don't panic. Don't run from it. Accept it. Sit with it. Let it teach you something. Because on the other side of that discomfort is growth. And with growth comes confidence, resilience, and yes, respect. Number 10. Imagine living as though today were your last day. Imagine waking up in the morning with the thought, what if today was my last day? It's not a gloomy or morbid exercise, it's actually about being alive in the truest sense. It's about making the most of the present moment, squeezing the juice out of every hour, and letting go of the distractions and nonsense that usually cloud your day. When you carry this mindset, things start to shift. Your priorities become sharper, your time feels more precious, and suddenly, the stuff that used to stress you out, it doesn't feel so heavy anymore. When you live like today could be your last, you don't waste time. You stop procrastinating on the things that matter, because there's no later to rely on. There's just now. It's not about cramming your day full of stuff to do, it's about doing the things that actually matter. You know, the conversations that go deeper than just surface-level small talk. The work that you care about. The people who matter most to you. If today were your last, would you spend it endlessly scrolling on your phone or stressing over something that's out of your control? Probably not. You'd choose what actually makes you feel alive. But here's the real magic of this mindset: it pulls you out of autopilot. So much of life is lived on cruise control, just going through the motions. We get caught up in routines, tasks, and all the little things that don't really matter in the grand scheme. When you think, "What if this was it?" you wake up. Every conversation feels a little more real. Every decision you make is intentional. You're fully present, and people feel that from you. There's something magnetic about a person who's living with that kind of awareness, with that kind of intensity. And when you start living with that kind of focus, you naturally command more respect. You're not drifting. You're not wasting time or energy on things that don't align with who you are or what you value. People pick up on that. They can sense that you're someone who's living with purpose, someone who doesn't take time for granted. It's hard not to respect someone who approaches life with that kind of clarity and drive. You become someone they prioritize, because your time feels valuable. And you know what? It is. Also, when you live like today could be your last, you let go of a lot of the petty stuff. Grudges, resentments, the little annoyances that normally get under your skin, they don't seem so important anymore. You become quicker to forgive, quicker to focus on what really matters. You stop sweating the small stuff, because why would you waste your last day on that? People respect those who can rise above the trivial and stay focused on the bigger picture. It's not about rushing or cramming your life into one day, it's about living fully, with presence and intention. When you embrace that mindset, you stop letting life happen to you. You start choosing how to spend your time, how to respond to challenges, and how to engage with others. You take control, and that's where the real power lies. Living like today could be your last day reminds you that life isn't infinite. That every moment you have is precious. And when you start treating your time that way, other people will start treating it that way too. Respect follows naturally because you're living with purpose, with urgency, and with a sense of appreciation for the moment you're in. And that's the kind of energy that people can't help but notice. Thanks for watching. If you found these 10 Stoic rules helpful, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Remember, true respect comes from within, and by living with integrity and practicing these timeless principles, you'll naturally command the respect of others. Drop a comment below on which rule resonated with you the most, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Stay grounded, stay focused, and keep striving to live a life of virtue. See you in the next one.